Hello, everyone. I'm excited to get started and show you some cool things today in SharkCloud and how we can really help you simplify your decision-making process. So like Liza mentioned, we're going to be focusing on how SharkCloud can help you take the guesswork out of your decisions. So we definitely have some cool things to show you. Before we jump into the tool, I'll just walk through a little bit about what SharkCloud is and what we're going to be covering today. So really, we're going to be focusing on how SharkCloud can help you reduce decision gaps and also eliminate decision waste. And I'll come back to what that really means here in a second. But really, once we get into the tool, we're going to be focusing on kind of a couple common problems that we see when working with various organizations, really across any sort of industry. And those are going to be understanding the relationship between the things that are influencing your decision making and the items that you're making decisions on. So this could be really applicable to any sort of use case. Again, in any industry, you could be visualizing the relationship between your projects and your goals in a roadmap, or the risks and your programs in a risk management solution. It's really understanding seeing the relationship between what's influencing your decision making. And also visualizing real-time information to solve both simple and complex problems. SharkCloud kind of sits above a lot of other line of business tools to help you aggregate information together and see the full picture, so everyone's making informed decisions on the latest and greatest data. And then lastly, connecting ideas to action. So there are a lot of great ways that you can run workshopping and brainstorming sessions, but then translating that into an actual action or a business productivity application so that you can kind of answer the question of what do we do next. So coming back to reducing decision gaps and eliminating decision waste, SharkCloud is a decision empowerment platform. So like I mentioned, it kind of sits above a lot of other tools and lets you aggregate everything together so you can make decisions easily and understand the full picture and understand what's going to be impacted when you make a decision. So how does SharkCloud help you do this? I mentioned reducing kind of the decision gaps. So really what that just means is the space between ideas and actions where critical questions should be answered, but they aren't. And that ultimately leads to decision waste. And that's the result of making these uninformed decisions where things like time, money, and effort are wasted on those kind of poor decisions. That all kind of culminates in decision fatigue, where you're spending hours and hours making these decisions on with all these complex pieces from across the organization. And ultimately, when that decision turns out to be not fully efficient, that can be pretty strenuous and strainful. And that's what we're hoping to address. So how does SharkCloud help you do this? Like I mentioned, we want to help you simplify the complex decision-making process that you have in your organization. We want to let you filter out the noise and really let you focus in on the items that will make a difference, and understand how a decision that you're making on one of those items are going to impact other areas of the business as well. And then ultimately how you can connect your different ideas and your actions that you're developing and connect those to your overall strategy. So with that being said, let's jump into some examples in the tool here. Before I jump into kind of the fun stuff here, I just want to preface what I'm going to be showing you today by saying that SharkCloud is an extremely customizable platform. So pretty much everything that you're going to be seeing here today can be tailored to suit your needs. What we're looking at here is just a really simple dashboard for a 10-year automotive roadmap. So that lets us give the user a little bit of context if they're not too familiar with the tool, to what they're going to be looking at in the different areas of our application that they can navigate to. And you'll see a couple of other examples of how SharkCloud can really be configured to suit your needs. But jumping into this first example here, like I mentioned, this is a 10-year automotive roadmap. So what we're going to be focusing on here is connecting our high-level initiatives to other areas of the business, things like our technology, R&D pipeline, the projects that we're working on, and the different risks that we're identifying as well, and kind of bringing all of that together to see how everything is connected. Let's go ahead and jump in here and take a look at our strategic landscape to start out with. So what we're looking at in this view here right now is we can see all of our projects and all the technologies that we're developing and that we're working on in this organization. So this is something that most people have when they have some sort of roadmap or portfolio. typically they have projects and technologies in there. We can see that we've associated some values for investment for our portfolio here. So total, I've invested 121 million pounds in all the projects that we have laid out here. But where SharkCloud really adds value is being able to connect these different objects, things like your projects and your technologies that we're working on, to some higher level influences, like different strategic goals that we've outlined for our organization. Here we can see that we've outlined 5 goals that we want to reach by 2030. So we can see those here. And then we've also identified some risks that are going to be impacting these projects and technologies as well. So SharkCloud lets you kind of bring all of this together and then see how everything is interconnected here. So you see when I flick this relationships toggle, I can see that there's actually a lot of complex interdependencies across all of these different areas of the business. And what I can do now is I can select any one of these items and I can see all of the different kind of upstream or downstream influences that are helping us meet one of our goals as an example here. So let's pick on this net decrease of carbon emissions goal that we have. So this is something that we want to achieve in the next 10 years. I can select this item and I can see all of the downstream impacts, all the different projects that are helping us meet this goal, but then also indirectly the technologies that are related to those projects and the risks that are impacting those items as well. So we get a really clear picture of all the different things that we need to kind of take into consideration when making decisions about this goal that we've outlined. Now, what I can also do is I can start to follow the thread of these relationships around this view here. So let's go ahead and select one of our projects here, this electrification of vehicles project. So here I can see that there are 2 related technologies to this project that are going to be considered inputs in this case. And also we've identified a couple of risks that are going to be impacting this project as well. Now, one thing I can see on this view here is one of these technologies, this graphene batteries technology, has been flagged with a red status. So we can see that by the border color here. And that's just indicating to me that something is potentially wrong with this technology, something that I'll need to take a closer look at. And I can now see that, well, actually that could potentially impact me being able to deliver this project that I'm concerned with. But what I can also do is I can kind of jump down and see, well, look at the relationships from the perspective of this technology and see exactly what else is going to be at stake if we can't address this status issue that we've identified. So here are the projects that are going to be impacted. There's a risk that is potentially impacting this as well, but also we can see that it's going to be impacting 2 of our goals that we've outlined. So we might want to take a closer look at these technologies and see exactly what's going on here. Now that we know that that's kind of the next step that we want to take, we can set up another view in SharkCloud that helps us take a closer look at some of these technologies. So let's jump down to this next view here. So here we're looking at kind of a subset of all of those items that we were looking at in the previous view, just that sort of technology layer. And here we've laid them out by their priority levels. So we can see high, medium, and low on the y-axis here. And across the bottom, we can see the different technology maturity stages that each of these technologies are bucketed into. So also at the bottom of the screen, you'll notice that we have some interactive filters, which makes it really easy for me to slice and dice this information and focus in on any particular subset of items that I'm concerned with. So let's go ahead and filter it down to show me just my red technologies. So anything that's been flagged with a red status. What I can also do is filter it down again to show just my high priority technologies here. So now that I've kind of filtered it down and I can see exactly the items that I'm concerned with, we'll also notice here that the size of these technologies here are different. So that's actually being determined by how many relationships these technologies have to different projects in this story. So those relationship lines are more than just a line between 2 objects on the screen. They're data points that we can now use in various ways throughout this story to give us a little bit more insight into what's going on. So this graphene batteries technology, I can see that it's bigger than this other technology that's been flagged red and meets the criteria that I was wanting to look at. So I might want to start here because this is going to be a really impactful technology in terms of the projects that it's related to. So now that I've kind of identified where I want to focus in my attention, I can drill down into this technology and I can see some of the underlying information just to give me a better sense of what's going on with this graphene batteries technology that we're developing. I can see a brief description telling me exactly kind of what we're building here. I can attach resources, things like documentation or links to websites that the user can either download or navigate to. I've also tagged this technology with which product groups it's going to be applicable to. And I can see some of the other technology attributes. So some of those other metadata points, things like priority level, who the owner is, where it is in our technology maturity level pipeline as well. But what I can also see here is all of those relationships to those other projects. So now I have a really clear understanding about which of these projects are going to be impacted. And maybe I want to take that insight and now look at those projects in a slightly different way, maybe in the context of time, to understand how what we're working on now is going to be impacted by this graphene batteries technology. So let's now jump down to another view where we're going to focus in on our projects in this case. So we can see here that we have a timeline laid out for over the next 10 years, and we can visualize all the different projects that we have going on, actually bucketed into their different key themes. So we've broken them out into our themes like electric vehicles or legislation or infrastructure changes, and we've color-coded these projects accordingly. Now, what you'll also notice is at the top of the screen here, I've actually included our goals, our strategic goals, so those 5 items that we started with, and I've included those in what we call the tray. And what that allows me to do is I can turn on the relationship lines here, and I can look at these relationships between the projects that we have in our timeline and those high-level goals that we're concerned with. So I can, again, select any one of these at any point in time and look at these relationships and projects and how they relate to these goals. But looking at the bottom of the screen here, I also have included some filters on this view, but these are slightly different. These filters actually relate back to those relationship lines that we were looking at before. So each of these labels down here corresponds to one of my either technologies or risks. And what that allows me to do is I can select any one of these technologies that I want to filter by, and I can look at how that other item is going to be impacting the items that we have in this timeline here. So let's go ahead and select this graphene batteries technology, and I can see that actually some of the technologies that are currently being developed are going to be impacted by that technology. So 3 of the ones that are going to be impacted are going on today. So they're active projects that we can then kind of analyze and make decisions on. What I can also see here is that one of the other projects that hasn't started yet, 2 of the other input projects here are going to be helping us deliver this 3rd project. And I can see that actually everything's kind of aligned currently because these relationship lines are actually colored green, and that's being determined by dynamic calculation in the background that takes into account the end dates for our input projects and the start dates for our output projects, and kind of color codes the relationship lines accordingly. So you can see if I adjust the time for this output project, the colors change for a relationship, indicating that there might be something that I need to adjust either with the start date of one of these other projects, or maybe push out the end date for this output project. But now that we're kind of understanding exactly which technologies or which projects are going to be impacted by the technology, we can see that there's actually one that hasn't started. So maybe I want to drill down and find out a little bit more information about this technology. So I can, of course, drill down here again. And you can see I'm presented with these panels once more, but you can customize these panels depending on what item you're looking at. So in this case, we're looking at a project rather than a technology. So I'm getting presented with some different panels here. I can include some infographics, some wireframes of what exactly this project is and what we're going to be developing. I can see different key metrics associated with my projects, things like the start and end date, the value for investment, the return on investment that I'm expecting. And again, some other videos, and I can see these relationships in a couple different ways here, breaking them out by the different goals that we're going to be meeting and other projects that are going to be affected. But if I jump back out of this view, here we're looking at kind of those the relationships that project that we're kind of concerned with right now, this electrification of vehicles. And I'm seeing the relationships to other items that I have on the screen. But I know that my roadmap is really complex and has a really large scope, and there are a lot of different moving pieces going on that might not have been included in this view. So at any point in time, I can include all of those other kind of background items that maybe were filtered out of the view, or maybe just, wasn't totally relevant to the question that I was asking, but I can reintroduce those at any given point in time and see what else will be affected. So in this case, I can see all those other projects that are going to be impacting this technology or this EV project that I've outlined. I can see which goals it's going to be helping me meet and any risks that I've identified as well. So this EV battery shortage is one risk that I've flagged that could potentially impact this project. So let's now take a step back and look at some of our risks that we're capturing in the story, and how we can kind of analyze those. So let's jump down to this next view here. So here we can see the 5 risks that we've identified. If you remember back to that first view, that kind of bottom layer, this is what we're looking at in this case. So I can see just a really simple list type of view that tells me and that orders all of these risks by their overall risk rating. This is actually a dynamic calculations being done in the background. It takes a couple different inputs like the impactfulness and how probable this risk is likely to occur, and kind of calculates an overall risk rating based on those metrics. You also notice on the right-hand side that I've included a form on this view, and that allows me to really simply just enter in a couple of data points for a new risk that I want to capture. And that then gets translated into a new item in my SharkCloud story. So let's go ahead and actually run through this really quickly right now. Let's add in a new risk that we want to track. So let's say that some of our competitors are innovating in our space. So competitor innovation is something that we want to track as a risk. We won't give it a description, but we will include some of these other metrics that I'm concerned with. So it's going to be it's going to be highly impactful. We don't have any mitigation efforts in place right now. And we can say that it's very likely that this is going to occur. What I can also do is I can create some of these relationship lines from this form as well. So any risks that I want to create a relationship to, maybe this has a connection to the economic slowdown, and it has a relationship to a couple different technologies here. And we'll say that it has a relationship to 3 or 4 different projects as well. So this is quite an impactful risk that we're capturing. But now all I have to do is hit submit. And you'll see that a new item will kind of fly into the screen here, and it automatically gets color coded with a risk rating based on that calculation that I have going on in the background. So what that also allows me to do, if you remember that we just created some of those relationship lines as well, what we can then do is jump back to a view where we can kind of bring it all together and look at how the risk that we just captured not only impacts our projects. So we can see that if we highlight competitor innovation here, you can see all those projects that I just created those relationship lines to from the form. But what I can do is kind of reintroduce all those other areas of our roadmap here, the different technologies that we're concerned with and our high level goals, which allows me to tie everything back together to see exactly what this new item that we just created, this single risk that we identified and captured kind of live with all the current data, and how that kind of connects to our overall strategy. So in this case, we can see that by virtue of the different projects and technologies that this risk is going to be impacting, it's actually going to help us, or it's going to be impacting all of our different goals. So it's definitely something that we'll want to kind of take into account when making decisions on this roadmap. So this is one example. Now I'm going to jump to another example here that uses forms again, and we can take a closer look at how you can kind of capture information live using these forms and run things like dynamic workshops, which you can then roll up into an existing application like a portfolio management solution or a roadmap, really any application that you have in SharkCloud. So here what we're looking at is similar to the last example. We're looking at a technology readiness level pipeline. So at the bottom here, we can see all the different stages from 1 through 9. We've also included some statuses with these technologies here on the y-axis. Now, one thing that's slightly different about this example here, you'll notice that we actually have a stage 0. And this is for new ideas that I want to capture. I can either distribute a form to members in my organization. So I can actually bring that up here and have them fill it out in the actual SharkCloud story. Maybe I want them to run a workshop with me in this application that I built, which then allows me to easily kind of take what we discussed during that workshop, that brainstorming session that we had, and then easily roll that up into my roadmap. Or I can just have them come in and scan a QR code or distribute this form via URL so that anyone who wants to interact with this form and submit their ideas for consideration can do so. And if you'd like to try it out, definitely whip out your phone and give this QR code a scan. We'll also put a form in the chat if you're on your computer. And you can fill out this form with a new innovation idea that could be applicable to this roadmap, this aerospace innovation roadmap that we have here. So we already have a couple ideas coming through around nuclear rods and zero fuel aircraft, which is fantastic. I'll leave this up here. just for a couple more seconds. So definitely give this a scan if you'd like to try it out. But now that we've kind of collected some of our ideas here, what we can do now is then kind of start analyzing these in a little bit more detail. So of course I can drill down and see some of the underlying data for these items here. So for nuclear rods, I can see that this has a value of investment of $40 million. And it's going to be impacting some of my high-level goals and has a connection to one of my partners here, this XYZ Aerospace company. So what I can then do is invite other members of my team to kind of come into the tool. What we can do is then maybe start voting on some of these items after we review them, and we start to understand kind of where we want to devote some of our time and attention. It's really easy to kind of visualize what the consensus is by just by looking at the items and sizing the items in different ways. So in this case, depending on the number of likes that each of these items gets, the size of the items change. So here we can see that we have a couple more items coming in. Fantastic. Solar wings. We can give this a review here. Maybe we want to give that a vote too. So these items are coming in. We can then decide, okay, here are the items that we want to take forward and continue to innovate on. We can then really simply just start updating the story, giving these items some more detail or dragging them to the relevant place in our technology readiness level pipeline. We'll say solar wings here is a technology concept, and nuclear rods is in this first stage, but both of them are ahead of schedule. So now that I've kind of captured this information and I'm updating it and changing kind of where they fall in my overall pipeline here, what I'm actually able to do is then dynamically report on these changes that were just made. So these live changes that we're making here in this workshop, capturing new information, I don't then have to go and create a whole new report that includes these two new technologies. I can really simply just create a SharkCloud presentation, which acts as like a framework for what I'd like to communicate to external stakeholders or leadership or to another customer or client of mine, which informs them on all this great new work that we've been doing. So I actually set up a presentation last year. Up here, we can see Q3 business review. I can go ahead and hit play here. And you'll see that when I do that, if I restart the presentation here and start to flick through, we can see that this presentation has been updated with the latest and greatest data. So there's new submissions that I just captured from that form. We can see here, we can see that these are actually both related to this one partner. So maybe I want to reach out to them, say, hey, we have a couple of new ideas that we think you'd be a good partner for. Do you want to collaborate with us in helping us develop these new technologies? But one thing you'll notice is that at any point in time during this presentation, I can stop and I can interact with the story just as I would be if I was looking at those different views, how we have been previously. And what that really allows you to do is you can let the conversation that you're having drive the presentation that you're giving, rather than the other way around. If you're using some sort of static document like our PowerPoint, it makes it a very audience-centric presentation. So let's now take a step back here. So this is one example of how you can kind of use SharkCloud to capture information onto a form and then kind of translate that automatically into your workflow. But what you can also do is set up specific SharkCloud applications for workshopping and brainstorming sessions. And that's what we're going to take a look at next here. So this example that I'm going to show next was actually based on a workshop that we ran with some of our customers earlier this year, specifically around workshop facilitation. So me and one of my colleagues, Alyssa, we facilitated this virtual workshop where we had roughly 20 or so of our customers come and collaborate with each other and submit their different challenges that they were facing around running workshops and submit best practices and things like that, so we can kind of see what the best way of using SharkCloud for this use case was. So we actually had a number of different people come from all over the globe. We can see that both myself and my colleague Alyssa were based here in the US, but we had people join from the Middle East and all across Europe and the United States and South America as well. So everyone was able to come in and collaborate in this single SharkCloud application, and you'll see some examples of that here in a second. So what we're looking at here is some of the best practices that we had users submit. So we had, like I said, roughly 20 people in the tool at the same time, and all they had to do was come and double click anywhere on the screen to create a new best practice that we wanted to start tracking and discussing in this brainstorming session. So depending on where it was applicable to in the overall kind of workshop process, whether it's before, during, or maybe a best practice for after the workshop completes, I just have to double click on the screen here and I can create a new best practice and give it a name. So maybe I want to have an agenda. So create an agenda for our workshop here. So I can just go ahead and double click on the screen and submit a new best practice. We can then take that information that we collected from all of our users and then analyze that in a couple of different ways. So here we can look at all of those kind of before the workshop best practices. So we have a couple of them here where we've then started to kind of group them and drag them onto this view because a lot of the submissions, even though they were all fantastic submissions, a lot of them were quite similar. So we were able to kind of condense all of these together and create some like submissions, but also save the nuance between each of the different submissions that we did get. So we've grouped a couple of them here that were kind of similar. So technical prep, sufficient training. These are two kind of similar best practices. So what I'm actually able to do is I can select these both and I can merge them into a single item, which then makes it easy for me to translate this into another application like I have. Maybe I want to create a project based on this submission and include that in my roadmap. All I have to do is merge these items together. I can pick what I want to call this new item. So we'll say technical prep, and I'll merge these into a new kind of single item here. But of course, I can drill down again, and I can see kind of any merged items that we have here. So again, we can save that nuance between each individual submission. So this is what we kind of did with the before the workshop best practices. We kind of took a subset of those submissions that we got. But then what we did is we actually looked at some more of our best practices and connected those to some of the challenges that our customers were facing as well. So in this case, we actually collected these challenges ahead of time. We sent out a form a couple of days in advance. And we collected all of these challenges that people were facing. And then what we did was we created some relationships between the best practices that we just all submitted kind of live during the brainstorming session to those challenges that people submitted ahead of time. So maybe some of the work that other customers were doing would be applicable to address the challenges of someone else in another organization. So we created these relationships, again, live kind of with SharpCloud on the front end during the workshop. You can create different types of relationships here as well. So we were actually capturing the level of difficulty of implementing this type of best practice. So we can select how difficult it would be to address a certain challenge with one of these best practices. Let's say that we want to create a new medium difficulty connection between one of these best practices and a challenge. And actually, we can say it's going to be a strong connection as well. So even though it's somewhat difficult, it's really going to address this challenge well. I can then just simply click and drag between one of these items here and create a new relationship, which then tells me that we can then address these challenges. But like I mentioned previously, you can analyze these relationships in a couple different ways. So we then took the data that we gathered from this type of view and the connections that we were able to make between these best practices and the challenges, and then analyze all of our challenges to see which of them have and then have not been addressed as well. So in this case, we can actually see a lot of our challenges do have a number of different best practices that are related to them. So they've been addressed really well. But if we look down at the bottom here, we do have some challenges that we haven't gotten to yet. So this might be an area where we can create some action items around so that we can really specifically address some of these challenges that maybe we don't have a best practice for just yet. So taking that insight that we just gathered from this type of view, we then jumped to another example where we, at the top of the screen, listed all of those challenges that maybe didn't have the relationships that we were looking for, or the insights we were looking for haven't been addressed yet. And then we just simply asked users to create some really specific actions that we think could address these challenges. Now that we know what we're trying to address, we can create some really specific actions around those. So let's go ahead and create a new item here. Let's say that we have a new long-term goal of implementing SharpCloud for workshops. It's going to be a long-term goal that we have. But I also asked users to include some additional points of metadata with these actions as well. So I asked them to include a level of feasibility for how easy it would be for us to implement this. So we'll say it's highly feasible and it's going to be very impactful here as well. So because I'm capturing this data, I can then set up some views ahead of time, which will help me analyze these actions that we're collecting live during the workshop, so that we know where we need to devote our time and energy to. So what I actually did is I set up another view again ahead of time. So all of this gets pre-populated just because the users included that metadata that I was looking for. So the levels of feasibility and impact get automatically plotted onto this matrix here and color-coded based on that kind of dynamic calculation. So we have another calculation that determines the priority of these different action items that we're creating based on those two metrics. So it makes it very easy for us to reduce the noise and filter it down to see just which actions I need to devote my time and energy to give me the most bang for my buck, and know which are going to be the most impactful actions that I can make decisions on. So this is kind of how we use SharkCloud for that workshop. Again, like I mentioned, SharkCloud is an incredibly flexible and customizable tool. So it really just depends on the questions that you're hoping to answer and what you need to make decisions on. And then you can set up and structure your SharkCloud application in a way that helps you answer those questions and make decisions with confidence. I'll go ahead and stop there. If you have any questions, definitely put them into the Q&A module. Obviously, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about SharkCloud, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to set up another call. We can dive into more depth and understand really what you're hoping to accomplish. But let's go ahead and see if we have any questions that I can go ahead and answer here. Liza, did any questions come through?
Hi, so we did have a couple of questions come through, if you don't mind answering them for us, Duncan.
Of course.
So how do I share my information across the organization? And can I control who has access to the solution that I've created? Like who can edit it, who can see it, who can update any of the data?
Absolutely. So SharkCloud has a couple of different mechanisms for controlling user permissions in an application. So once you have a SharkCloud license, you can create as many of these applications as you want. And then you can share those different applications, whether it be a roadmap or a workshopping solution with different people. And you can control the level of permissions that they have on a user by user basis. So whether or not they need to actually help you build and architect the solution, you can give them admin permission on the story so they can help you structure these different views in a way that helps you answer the questions that you need. But you can also restrict users to just being able to edit data and create new submissions, add new items into your story, or just view the items that you've created. So it all depends on the level of connectivity and the level of interaction that you want these users to have. But there are a number of different ways you can control them on kind of a team level and an individual level as well.
Awesome. Thank you for answering that and clearing that up. I have another question here. So can I connect SharkCloud to existing systems and tools that we use to import and export data to SharkCloud from other tools?
Absolutely. So SharkCloud has a number of different ways you can both pull data into the tool and push updates out. And it all depends on the level of connectivity that you need to this other system. So we have a tool called Query Connect, which is our database connection tool, which lets you connect to essentially any database, whether it's a homegrown system or something like Jira or SharePoint, and you can pull that data into SharkCloud using SQL queries and map it exactly to what you need in SharkCloud. Now we've also been developing what we're calling bidirectional connectors, and that's essentially like an overlay on top of SharkCloud that gives you a user interface which you can then connect and authenticate into some of the more common systems that we see, things like Jira and SharePoint, Microsoft Excel Online, Microsoft Projects, and then you can, using a graphical user interface, map the data that you have in that system to your SharkCloud story, and then not only pull that data into SharkCloud, but also push any changes that you made in SharkCloud back to that other system, so everything stays up to date and synchronized. So it all just depends on the level of connectivity that you need and whether or not it needs to be automated, but we definitely have a number of options in place.
Great, thank you. And then the last question that we have so far, so if there are any other questions, please be filling in the Q&A section. But how quickly can a user get up to speed, and what level of support would we have once we're onboarded?
Yeah, so SharkCloud does have a really great quick start series in our SharkCloud Academy. So once you have your SharkCloud license, everyone has access to the Academy and they can navigate to it by clicking on our resource center icon down in the bottom right hand side and just clicking on SharkCloud Academy. So we have a really good quick start course there that kind of walks you through not only just the basics of how to use the product, but also how to think about how you want to architect your solution. And that really takes less than an hour to go through that course. So you can get the basics kind of out of the way fairly quickly. But we have a lot more material in there around some of the more advanced features that you can do as well. And then you'll also have someone like myself, part of this customer success team, who you can reach out to and will help you along the way as well.
All right. Thank you so much. I think those are all the questions that we have so far. So Duncan, thank you for taking us through today. We really appreciate it. If there are any further questions, or again, if anyone would like to have a personalized demo, you can sign up by using the QR code on your screen.